Hello and welcome to this episode of Rule of Carnage. A special, I guess we'll call it a celebratory episode of Rule of Carnage, a celebration for us anyway, because Mike and I have been working for a little while now on a book, which we are confident in being able to say that we're about to sign off on the manuscript and send it along to the publishers. So we know what is going to be in it, and so we would like to talk a little bit about it. It's still a little ways from its final form and going into the publishing stream and etc. etc. But yeah, about February 2022 now, or around that sort of time, the academic publisher CRC Press reached out to us because presumably they were confused and bewildered.
I don't know. I mean, we easily had 300 followers on YouTube.
Because they were looking for somebody to write a serious sort of academic text on the how to write a tabletop miniatures war game. And it would appear that if you go to like Google and you search how to write a tabletop miniatures war game,
These mugs show up.
these are the faces you get, because there's a dearth of information on this subject. And so through going back and forth a little bit and sort of working up a proposal, they accepted for us to write the fundamentals of tabletop miniatures game design. And that's what me and Mike have been doing one of the things we've been doing. We've been eating and sleeping as well. But that's what we've been doing for the last sort of 18 months to 2 years.
And we keep accidentally sort of hinting in the direction of, it on this channel and sometimes in comments and stuff. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
nice to be able to talk about it finally.
yeah, several times. Like obviously it's been the best part of 2 years now, and it's been not uncommon that someone's popped up in the comments or in a Discord or something like that and said, "You guys should write a textbook. The textbook on this would be really great." And it's been very much like, "Well, funny you should say," and sort of not being wildly committal on it
Right,
because
and when people ask for recommendations, obviously we recommend this fine book.
yeah,
But as we've said before, like this is a designer's handbook about more like how to write rule books rather than how to write games. There's some of both in it, but
yeah, I love that book, but I think that's a book about, okay, you've got a game and you want to put it into a format in order to present it to another person and possibly
mm,
get it published. That's a great book for that. It does a bit of going into mechanics and etc., but that's not super what I think it's for. And it's a really does a, and we haven't touched the whole thing of here's how to format a set of rules and put them out into the world. Frankly, personally, because that book exists, I didn't think it was necessary.
mm.
Um, but
So Glenn,
it's
what have we done? What's in our book?
so what the book is, what we try to do is a few things. First of all, like the first section of the book is trying to talk about what miniatures, tabletop miniatures games are, like philosophically, theoretically, practically, what they're good at, what they do, what excites us about them, what hopefully should excite you about them if you want to write one of them. Then the next section of the book is quite a sort of I think in places quite crunchy examination of different possible mechanics you might want to use in one of these games, comparing and contrasting, trying to like also open up to lesser used mechanics. I think that's what one of the things we've tried to really go for a bit is to sort of say, look, this is not how most people do it, but here's a really interesting thing to consider. Lots of examples of existing versions of mechanics, little case studies of games that do a particular mechanic very, very well, mentioning how they do it, how they go about using it. Um, there's there can be a little link to a sort of online automatic miniatures games generator.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether we hold that back until the publication of the book, or unleash it on the general design public sooner. I think it'll probably have to be alongside the book.
Yeah, because one of the things we've done in the book is like at the end of each chapter, as well as a summary, there's a handful of like things you can do to your game, like a little experiments to sort of say, okay, if your game does X, try doing Y. It's probably not a good idea, but just try doing it and see what happens, see what falls out. And obviously, if you're reading the book, as some people will be, without a game to do that to, sort of said, look, either pick a game you're really, really familiar with, one of your own designs, or swing by this website, hit a few buttons, and it will poop out a basically functional minis game for you. Not a good minis game, but a functional one. And then you can do these experiments to pull the levers on that and see what happens to it and what it does. Yeah, and so like in the past weeks, months, we've got to a point I think where we're happy to say this is where it's going to be. We're getting ready to wing it off to the publisher. And so we're now in a place where it's like, okay, it is what it is. We can now talk about it a bit. And I think we'll talk about it a little bit and we'll celebrate it here. And then as the actual publication date gets closer, or at least confirmed, we might talk about it again and sort of suggest it to people and talk more about what's in it. But yeah, I mean, it's something I mean incredibly proud of.
Mm.
I'm very excited to have been able to do it. It is something that doesn't exist. It is something that is. I don't know. I think I was immensely happy that it was CRC Press, particularly and I'm not like, not to be funny or anything, but a serious publisher of serious textbooks. This is an opportunity to say, look, this is an area of war game design that is of game design, which, whilst it's lovely that it's welcoming to house ruling, and I think that's one of the greatest things about it, it is not just a bunch of hobbyists, pushing around miniatures. It is a thing that has serious and interesting things to say about games and game design and the way they can work and the stories they can tell. And it doesn't deserve to be as left behind as it has been comparative to, obviously, video game. There's massive writing on it, and board games. CRC has a bunch of books on board games, really, really great one. It so happens that they asked me to do a peer review, which meant that I got given some free books, and I've ordered a thing on feminism in wargaming, which is really fascinating thing. But there's not a lot of books about these sorts of things in the world that treat it seriously as a sort of an academic study. And so I'm really delighted about it. I'm really happy with it. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in it.
Yeah, I think like one of the things that I'm most proud of, which this is Glenn's work really, but in trying to figure out what it was that makes these games essentially these games, we were orbiting around some stuff, but Glenn eventually posited that it's this non-discrete relationship between objects in space, and that player markers and the non-discrete relationships and spatial relationships is absolutely critical. And adding to that the fact that you can riff on the word non-discrete by saying it's also not a discrete set of components. It's like an infinity of different objects can be welcomed into these rule systems, which is so that ended up with us, because we've called the book The Fundamentals of Tabletop Miniature Games Design, but we didn't really want tabletop miniature games to be the name of the thing that we were writing about, because there's lots of tabletop games that use miniatures that aren't these games. Hero Quest is one of them that isn't. And so hitting on this idea of non-discrete miniature games, that kind of opened this whole thing up for me conceptually. Like that provided us with the beginnings of what I think was really like what I think is successful in the book, and I'm really proud of, is the fact that the terminology is quite generalized and unattached from military simulation and war games. And so by treating these as, well, no, the interesting thing is the non-discrete relationships of the objects in space and the non-discrete welcoming of components. And then if you go through and say, well, it's not a shooting phase, it's a ranged interaction phase, then you can free these games from their their heritage and their obsession with armed conflict. Not that I, as a designer, am successful in doing that myself, but I want it to be true as much as Glenn wants it to be true. And so I think that's part of what we're excited about with this book, and what we're hopeful will be true about it, is if we can provide a set of terminology that's not only available for other designers so that we can actually have conversations with at least some set of potential coherent shared terminology, but that those pieces of terminology are considered in ways that are not locked to, you know, subjects of warfare and shooting each other. That would be great.
Yeah, and I think, as I say, that the first part of the book is about conceptual language and trying to nail down some terms, because as we've talked before on this channel about how, just for an example of a particularly annoying one, I go you go and alternating activation,
Right.
um literally synonyms, and quite often I have to re-explain what they are and what the difference is to people, quite reasonably, because they're just gibberish terms. They're jargon, and until someone explains which one is which, there's no way of telling, because both of them refer to each other. I'm sort of going to say, look, okay, these are the terms these have been referred to. It's fair enough if you don't use those, but maybe it's a nice idea if we refer to them as this and that, because this is what the difference actually is between them. And for some terms, just sort of going, okay, there isn't a term for this thing and there isn't a term for that thing, because we've never bothered. We just have an accretion of understanding amongst a sort of a group of cognoscenti that already play these things. It's like, well, that makes it hard to discuss them, hard to talk about them, hard to share them with other people. Maybe it's time to sort of go, okay, let's just have somebody step up and put down some markers here and make some words for them.
The other thing, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, just like, because as you were saying, it's like, I'm fine with, I am okay, I'm fine with these games being about warfare and being about shooting and being about combat, like within like where they're expressed and where they're created. But that's not conceptually what the mechanics of the games need to be about. What I'm doing is I'm trying to make angles and relationships and spaces interesting. And I can call that one thing and I can call that another, but the game is about those angles and relationships, and then you can put like a genre and a theme around it. But it's more important we realize what's interesting about shooting is those relationships, rather than whatever, that you're strictly simulating someone getting hit by a bullet. It's like that's a thing that's worth doing, but it's not the gamic element that we're sort of really working on there.
Certainly worth simulating rather than doing it in reality. The other thing that I'm really pleased with as a result of going through the work of writing this book is sort of understanding for myself why, like, as a designer, I don't really design board games. I'm not drawn to designing board games or card games. I'm not drawn to designing video games either. And for a long time, I haven't really been able to explain to myself what it is that I get excited about when it's got miniatures in it, and when it allows me to use, random bits of terrain and stuff. So I think for myself, like, I was missing a piece of conceptual language to sort of understand why I get excited by making things that are like the things that I make, and why I choose to make those over everything else. Because to a degree, it's just like, well, I was brought up on these kinds of games, and so I want to keep making more like that. But that's the conceptual limitation that, well, we want to push past and say, well, we're not making things like this. We're making things that are of a specific kind. And so now we can make more different kinds of those, because we understand what they are actually limited by, rather than being limited by, well, I played a lot of Warhammer and I played a lot of skirmish games, so I better just make some more of those.
Yeah, and I think also for me, I've been going through this thinking about why, although I do obviously, write card games and board games, every now and again I think every now and again I think I look at Kickstarter and I think, how you make money on Kickstarter, light to midweight euro. I should probably try and write a light to midweight euro. I hate every single thing about that. And I was sort of thinking about why
Glenn hates money.
I have a quite visceral like dislike of what is collectively termed Euro games.
Hmm.
And part of going through this has been coming to realize why I don't like them. And in a way, it's where I connect to what I think Mike likes about miniatures games. And it's a realization is like Euro games are about the process of a game and sort of interacting with a process of the game while somebody else is interacting with it. Like both got our hands in the same pot, but we're not ever really touching each other.
Hmm.
And those games don't happen to interest me. When I do design card games, the games are about trying to get a person to interact with another person. And the thing I think that I love about miniatures games, and I think it's the thing that keeps attracting Mike to me, you might correct me, is that the squishy weirdness of the non-discrete nature of them makes them much more, I think, much more human and much more about sort of understanding things in a human way. The fact that you can move a miniature an infinite amount of gradations along a path is a thing that is a very human concept. That in infinity of breakdowns is a thing that destroys computers and is impossible to like nail down in board game mechanics. And these sorts of games just go, you just push the thing and you stop it anywhere up to 4 inches, and how you deal with that and the angles it creates and the spaces it builds. I'm not going to write about that in the book because I can't. You, as a human, are really good at reading that and understanding it, and that's what I love about these games. Is that sort of very human interaction with it, and it's exactly the thing that I don't like about board games that go, everything's a set of discrete steps and machines that you chunk along, and you ideally don't ever look the other person in the eye because you're not really interacting with them, you're moving blocks around. And if you love those, that's fine, that's great. I don't want to sort of game shame anybody, but for me it's just like I can't write that because I just don't care about it.
Mm.
Yeah, and thinking about those things, thinking about the weird nebulous nature of these games, it's been a lot of fun, over these past 18 months. And quite a few of the conversations of Rule of Carnage over the past few months have been us dealing with a particular chapter and choosing to sort of stick a camera on it and talk about it and engage with it. So there are a few conversations, I think, to people that if they've watched the videos and then read the book might go, oh, I think I know when
Yeah,
you'll
you'll have seen the development of some of our arguments real time.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing that's fun about it is we have to cut it and step away from it and send it to the printer, to send it to the publisher now, but it feels like we've reached like the first milestone in this conversation. But I think even by the time we go to print, I don't know how long it's going to take, but maybe 6 months, maybe 18 months to get this thing in paper. I think by then, even then, we will have moved on from our thinking and we'll want to have said different things in the book. So I guess the other thing that's for me is really true about it is that I'm feeling quite humble about the material. I'm very proud and excited about the material, but I'm also feeling quite humble that like it's just part of a conversation. It's not in any way definitive, and it's necessarily incomplete because we only had 100,000 words to cover this stuff, and honestly, we could have written twice as long. And I think there are other places where our areas of expertise are incomplete, particularly when we're talking about things to do with, human psychology and player psychology and stuff, like where we know enough to be dangerous, and we try and introduce some of those elements to make sure that we are connecting what we're talking about with the wider world. But we're not academics and we haven't got all of the research to hand, and so I'm also excited to see like people disagreeing with the things that we've said productively as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's one of the things I like sometimes in the comments of Rule of Carnage is where somebody pops up and says, I disagree with you and your opinion on this, or whatever else. And it sometimes smiles because in whatever that video is, sometimes I'll have said, my point here is question the thing, think around it. Here's an option of the way I like to do it. And it's always like, you don't mean that, I hope you don't mean that you disagree with me because I hope you are trying to think around it. That's why you're watching this video. You mean you disagree with my conclusion like on it and what I like to do, and that's fine. That I'm
Mhm.
fully in favor. I'm well in favor of that. Please do it your own way, but don't disagree with the fact that we should like re-question these mechanics and wonder why they're in the games and wonder why we've used the main thing I keep saying, like whenever I'm trying to talk to people that are designing games, is you don't put something in because that's what these sorts of games do. Don't
Mm.
do it because that's what you're meant to do and that's what meant to be. That's that does not lead anywhere good. Question it, think about it, think about why it's in your game. um and yeah, like writing the book repeatedly, we've come to bits and it's been like, well, what is actually our opinion on this? And sometimes I've been like, I'm not really sure, let's figure it out. Sometimes I've been like, I'm pretty sure my opinion is this, and then after writing 3 or 4 thousand words on it, I'd be like, oh no, it's that's not my opinion on it. I didn't know what my opinion was, but now I do. And like as we've been going through it, there've been bits where we've been like, what did you mean by this? What exactly is this about? What? And several times I've been like, well, I thought I meant that, but I realized I don't. I mean something else entirely different. And
Yeah,
like you say,
and particularly in the third section about all the different miniature rule systems and how you can approach them. Like, I hope what comes across is that we've ended up trying not to have very strong opinions about which is the right mechanic, but like presenting some pros and cons of each mechanical approach. Even the hoary old chestnut of like model's eye line of sight versus abstracted line of sight. Like, my hope is that people read that chapter and go, oh, okay, there are valid reasons for choosing both, and there are poorer times to choose one or the other given the parameters of my design. And that's what I think we've tried to do throughout, is not come at it too much with our own personal opinions, but obviously our personal opinions will come out through what we think is strong or weak about each of those mechanical choices. But yeah.
yeah, and I think that's why like the way we've written the book in sort of talking about the high level conceptual bits and then the mechanical bits has been important, because it's to try and say like, okay, step one is for you to figure out what you want your game to be, because we've got a whole bunch of different like suits you can wear
Yeah.
once you've decided what you want to look like. And I'm not saying that, the tuxedo is better than the linen morning suit, but we're going to need what you want to look like, and then we can fit it to you. And those mechanical chapters are very much like, look, this does X, which is fine, and this does Y, which is fine. But don't try and do both of them, and don't try and do the one that doesn't fit for your game. And you need to then know what is your game, and we'll help you once you made that decision. And we can lead you to some of the things you might want to think about that might help you make that decision. And we can talk to you about how you can break out the idea of, I want to make a game like the Bourne Supremacy. All right, well, that means this, and it means a thing about theme, and it means a thing about terrain and miniatures, and it means a thing about this and a thing about that. And maybe that helps you, and now we can help you through. But I can't and don't want to tell you how to make your game anyway. You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think hopefully it's an interesting and useful set of things. I think we want it to be the sort of thing, both that someone can come to this book and read it through like without having something in mind from end to end and get some like interesting ideas, but also a thing where if you're working on a design, if you're partway through something, that hopefully you can dip in, you can swing by the chapter on line of sight when you're faffing with your line of sight rules and get some things to make you go back to it with a little bit of a, all right, okay, yeah, I've got some ideas now, I've got some different ways of looking at it. And hopefully that'll be, I would like it to be a thing that people return to and flick back through, and that gets dog-eared and battered and has a cracked spine. As someone's like, I just need something to get the juices moving on activation systems, and come back there and see what these two idiots have said about it, and rechurn things. And that would make, that made me very happy. It made me very happy if, I ever see somebody going, because I often see people saying, "Oh, is there a book anyone would recommend about this?" And the day when someone says, "Well, that one, that's the one you need to read about this," will be a very happy day for me. Make me very glad.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I agree. I agree. So I'm really happy that we got to the end of it. I think it was a bit of a long haul. We ended up turning it in. Well, we ended up I ended up asking for an extension because of my occupational burnout last year, stopped me from being able to write on it for a while. So it's drifted a little bit in terms of its submission, but that just makes it absolutely clear that we're writers.
Well, yeah, and it's better to have the time to repass over things and recheck them and come back to it with, 'cause it's been interesting for me because like the day we got the contract signed was the day I started writing, and I did a lot of the
Glenn
writing.
and I have very different processes, if it isn't already apparent from other conversations.
Yeah, well, we were going through the pitch, and I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this will take what 6-9 months maybe to knock out. And Mike was like, yeah, we'll need about 18 months to 2 years. And I was like, all right, okay. I mean, and so I basically had most of my like writing on it 6 months in, and then it gave me the opportunity to come back to it with a different sort of set of viewpoints and a different opinion, and go back over some of the stuff I'd written, and like be able to reassess it, which was a nice thing to have ultimately, and I think it made it better for it. But yes,
Yeah.
so
So anyway, we're very excited that we've finished it. We're very excited to tell you about it in the future when we know when the delivery date is going to be. But I think from my perspective, I wanted the opportunity just to tell folks like it exists, it is on its way, it's going to be a thing. So when if you are hankering for something to read on the topics of this and you can't be asked to listen to us blabbing anymore on this channel, then coming soon to a bookshelf near you, us blabbing in print form.
absolutely. And obviously as we get dates and timelines that we will be talking about it wherever people will listen, and I'm sure that you'll hear about it before it comes out, on the delivery date from one or another of our channels. But yeah, just wanting to sort of say we've done this thing. It is in a final form. It is close to existing physically in the world, and
Mhm.
we'd like people to know about it and be excited about it, because we're excited about it, and I think it'd be a good thing. Okay, well, if you are interested in there being a textbook on how to design better miniatures games, tell us about it in the comments section.
Provide all your personal details in the comments section, and we will put you on the pre-order list.
If you're not interested in such a book, don't tell us, and definitely don't tell CRC Press, because that's that's not information they need to know. We told them there would be a large audience for this sort of thing. A
I'm
large
not sure you need a large audience for an academic textbook. I think we'll be all right.
I know, yeah, I told them I knew at least 4 people, so that seemed to
Anyway,
be.
buy 2 copies, give one to a friend.
If you do go down and do that in the comment section, please hit the like and subscribes. It helps publishers find us when they're looking for people to write books.
Mm-hmm.
Swing by the Discord and tell us if you're excited about it. Swing by Mike's Patreon and give him money so that when waiting for advances on books, he doesn't have to eat his own shoes.
Oh God, advances on books. Don't even make me laugh.
For now, from this episode of Rule of Carnage, it's going to be a thank you and goodbye. So, thank you and goodbye.
Yours academically.